Security, I need her off this plane now. The flight attendant's voice sliced through the cabin like a blade. Passengers froze mid-motion, heads turning, unsure what had just happened. In the middle of the first-class aisle, a small black girl stood still, clutching her boarding pass with both hands. Her oversized hoodie swallowed her tiny frame. Her voice, soft but steady, tried to explain, "This is my seat. It's on my ticket." But the uniformed woman wasn't listening. She waved her hand toward the bulkhead door, already calling for security over the cabin phone. "Ma'am, she's a minor." One passenger protested, but the flight attendant cut him off. "She's trespassing. This seat is reserved for a priority guest." Before we dive into this shocking moment of injustice, tell us where you're watching from. Because what happens next will shake everything you believe about power, privilege, and a little girl with a secret legacy. 12-year-old Aria Westbrook hadn't wanted to sit in first class. She hated attention. She hated small talk. And she especially hated when people looked at her like she didn't belong. But this was her father's routine. "Fly comfortable," he always said. "You deserve to take up space in this world." She had heard it so many times that she could almost believe it, until moments like this shattered the illusion. That morning had started like most travel days. Early wake-up, security lines, noise, the usual chaos of a crowded airport. Except this time, her father wasn't with her. He had to take an earlier flight to New York for a board meeting, trusting his assistant and security team to escort Aria through the airport. "Aria's got this," his assistant Kendra had said confidently. "She knows the routine." She did. Until now. As the flight attendant's accusations grew louder, Aria's skin prickled, not from fear, from something older, colder, familiar. She had seen this look before, in malls, at hotel lobbies, even school events. That mix of suspicion and disbelief. A black girl, alone, in a space deemed too luxurious for her. Aria felt every eye and first class turn toward her, some curious, some uncomfortable. Others, silently complicit. No one moved. No one stood up. She knew what came next. A security guard. A scene. A stain that would follow her longer than the flight itself. Her hands shook as she tried one last time. "Please, just scan the ticket. You'll see. My name's Aria Westbrook." The flight attendant snorted. "You expect me to believe a little girl like you has a seat up here? Do I look stupid?" Aria blinked. Her throat tightened. It wasn't just the humiliation. It was the growing dread in her chest, because she could feel the panic attack creeping in, slow and inevitable, like waves closing in on a shore. That's when a voice crackled through the intercom. "Cabin crew, please stand by." The captain. A pause. A break in the script. But before we return to that moment, let's rewind 48 minutes. Because to understand what was really happening in Row 1A, you need to know what Aria had already endured that morning. Earlier that morning. Gate 42. Seattle-Tacoma. International. It was a foggy Seattle morning when Aria arrived at the gate, escorted by her dad's longtime driver, Leon. He handed her a juice box and winked. "Straight to first class, little boss," he said, like he always did. Aria smiled politely. She liked Leon. He didn't ask too many questions. He just showed up, opened doors, and always seemed to have warm hands. At the gate, everything felt normal. Until it didn't. The gate agent, a middle-aged white woman with a tight ponytail and colder eyes, had hesitated when scanning Aria's ticket. "You're flying alone?" "Yes, ma'am." She tilted her head. "Where are your parents?" "My dad's in New York already. His assistant checked me in." And you're in first class? Arya nodded. The woman pressed her lips into a flat line and made a show of examining the boarding pass, holding it up to the light like it might be counterfeit. Arya stood still, her backpack pressing awkwardly against her shoulders. "Wait over there," the woman said. "I need to make a quick call." Arya obeyed. She always obeyed. That was part of the unspoken deal. You don't talk back, you don't make waves, and maybe they'll let you exist peacefully in spaces you're not expected to be in. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Other passengers boarded. Some glanced at her. One even smiled sympathetically. Finally, the gate agent waved her forward with a stiff nod. "You can board now. No apology, no explanation." Arya walked down the jet bridge with a tightness in her chest she couldn't shake present. 35,000 feet and falling trust. The flight attendant hadn't even asked for Arya's name, just saw a black child in a hoodie and decided, wrong place. "I'll need to speak with whoever brought her here," she said, scanning the cabin. "This child is clearly not authorized." Arya's breathing picked up. Her hands trembled. The panic was winning. But just as the flight attendant reached for the cabin phone again, a voice came from behind. "Is there a problem here?" The new speaker wore a navy uniform with 3 gold stripes on his sleeve. "Co-pilot." The flight attendant straightened. "This passenger is in the wrong seat." "Her ticket?" he asked calmly. "She claims to be in 1A, but—" "Then scan it," the co-pilot interrupted. "Let's just verify." The attendant hesitated. Then, reluctantly, she pulled out her handheld scanner. Beep. Passenger name, Area Westbrook. Seat 1A. Status, Platinum Legacy. Silence. The co-pilot looked at her. Seems like she's exactly where she's supposed to be. The flight attendant's mouth opened, then closed. Passenger stirred. Someone coughed. Another whispered. Unbelievable. Arya stood still. Her knees wobbled, her breathing slowed. But something inside her had shifted. She wasn't afraid anymore. Not right now. Because for the first time today, someone had spoken up for her. And that wasn't the last time it would happen. Not today. Not when the name Arya Westbrook still carried weight beyond what anyone on this flight could imagine. By the time Arya sat down in the airport security office, the buzz of adrenaline had dulled into something colder, heavier. Her heart still thudded, not from fear exactly, but from the sharp sting of public humiliation. Just 10 minutes ago, she was standing in the first-class boarding lane, holding her ticket like everyone else. Now she was here, in a room that felt more like an interrogation chamber than a customer service station. The walls were blank, the lighting too harsh. A security officer named Patel sat across from her, his tone polite but mechanical. Next to him, the flight attendant, Miss Landry, she'd said, stood with her arms folded tightly across her chest, her jaw tight. "So, let's go over this again," Officer Patel said, clicking his pen. "You were attempting to board Flight 792 to Atlanta?" "Yes," Arya said, her voice low but even. "I was standing in the priority lane. My father booked me a first-class seat." Miss Landry scoffed. She was standing there without a guardian. No minor should be traveling in that section alone. It looked suspicious. Arya blinked. "I'm not a minor." Patel looked up. "How old are you?" 12? Landry smirked. "Exactly. But I have a valid ID," Arya said. "It's a youth travel authorization issued by Sky North. I've flown solo before." Patel flipped through the paper copies in front of him, most of which had been printed off after Miss Landry had flagged her presence. "There's no sign of fraudulent documents here," he murmured. "Everything seems in order." Miss Landry leaned in. Look, I don't care what paperwork she has. It just didn't sit right. The way she walked up, like she owned the place. Arya flinched at that, like she owned the place. The words echoed differently inside her. If only Miss Landry knew. Patel turned to her again. Do your parents know where you are? Yes, Arya said, choosing her words carefully. My mom dropped me off. My dad is waiting in Atlanta. Do you have a number we can call to confirm? She hesitated. Her hand went to her phone, but then stopped. She'd promised no family calls unless absolutely necessary, and she wasn't ready to break that. Instead, she opened her purse, pulled out the letter, folded 3 times, on thick, personalized paper, and slid it across the table. Patel read it, then blinked. This is signed by Malcolm Westbrook. Yes, Arya said quietly. He looked up. As in, the Malcolm Westbrook, CEO of Horizon Partners? She nodded. Miss Landry froze. What? Arya didn't answer. Let them sit with it. Officer Patel seemed to realize, belatedly, that the room had shifted. Let me just make a quick call to confirm your travel details, all right? Arya didn't speak as he left the room, left alone with Miss Landry. The silence was sharp. You should have said something earlier, she muttered. Could have avoided all this. I shouldn't have to prove I belong somewhere, Arya said, her voice quiet but firm. Landry turned, eyes narrowing. Listen, kid, there are rules, and there's common sense. And common sense says a kid like you doesn't belong in first class unless someone's trying to pull something. A kid like me? Arya repeated. Landry hesitated, realizing too late how it sounded. Before she could dig deeper, Patel returned, this time walking straighter. Her seat checks out, confirmed under priority booking, and the executive line confirmed. She's under the Special Horizon Travel Directive. Everything's legit. Landry's face went pale. Patel turned to Arya. You're free to rejoin your boarding group. I'll escort you back myself. Sorry for the inconvenience, Miss Westbrook. Miss Westbrook. It was the first time someone in this building had said her name with weight, but it didn't feel like a victory. As Arya stood, she looked at Miss Landry one more time. I may be 12, she said. But I'm not invisible. She followed Officer Patel out. As they walked through the hallway, he glanced at her sideways. I hope you don't take this the wrong way, he said. But people are going to make assumptions. It's not right, but that's the world we live in. Arya nodded slowly. I know, but that doesn't mean I have to accept it. They reached the gate just as boarding resumed. Passengers turned as Arya walked back through the waiting area with the officer beside her. Some whispered, others just watched. She felt every stare. Patel handed her ticket back and gave her a gentle nod. Safe flight, Miss Westbrook. She gave him a polite smile, but her eyes were already scanning the gate. Landry was still there, pretending to be busy at the kiosk, but Arya could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands shook slightly as she tapped on the tablet screen. She was worried. Good, because this wasn't over. Not even close. The terminal at Lexington International buzzed with the midday rush. Pilots briskly wheeled carry-ons behind them. Parents herded restless children, and airport announcements punctuated the air with rhythmic urgency. Arya Westbrook sat silently on a bench just past Gate 22, hugging her sketch pad to her chest, her legs swinging just a few inches above the ground. From the outside, she looked like any shy, quiet 12-year-old traveling alone. But inside, Arya's thoughts were anything but still. The confrontation earlier with the flight attendant replayed on a loop in her mind. The dismissive tone, the pointed questions, the look of suspicion that screamed louder than words. "You don't belong here." She had been escorted away from the gate, her ticket in hand, her boarding pass verified, and still treated like an intruder. Her voice had caught in her throat when security was called, the stares from other travelers pricking her like needles. She hadn't cried then, but the pressure in her chest now felt like an overinflated balloon threatening to burst. "You okay, sweetheart?" a janitor had asked gently while mopping nearby. Aria managed a nod and a faint smile. She wasn't okay, but she wasn't going to say that out loud. Not yet. She reached into her backpack and pulled out her phone. The wallpaper showed a photo of her and her grandfather at the annual Sky North Aviation Gala. He was in his tux, a proud arm draped over her shoulder, and she was wearing the same navy blazer she had on now, hair pulled back neatly, smile soft but confident. She stared at the photo for a long time, then opened her messages. Subject: "They tried to kick me off the flight again. Same airline, Gate 22. Can you help?" She hit send and then clutched the phone to her chest, her breathing shallow. She knew she had every right to be in first class. She knew her name was on that ticket, but none of it seemed to matter when people only saw a black girl, alone, dressed too neatly, asking for too much. 30 miles away, Everett Westbrook, a man whose name never appeared in press releases, but whose influence quietly funded 3 of the largest airline tech platforms in North America, read the message in his car. He didn't react outwardly, but inside, something old and fierce stirred. "Turn the car around," he told his driver. "We're going to Lexington International now." Back in the terminal, Aria stared at her sketchpad, trying to distract herself. She flipped to the last drawing she'd made, a plane soaring above a cityscape. The tail bore the logo she'd designed for a fictional airline in her art class. Sleek, futuristic, wings folded like an origami bird. In that world, no one got questioned at the gate. No one was told they didn't belong. "You must be Aria Westbrook." She looked up. A woman in a crisp navy blazer with the name tag Shelby stood there, flanked by a security officer. "Please come with us. Your flight's been reassigned." Aria stood slowly, her eyes narrowing. She didn't say a word, just clutched her sketchpad tighter and followed. Meanwhile, at the Sky North corporate tower, a call from Everett Westbrook was triggering emergency protocols. His assistant, Janine, was already alerting airport liaisons. "Full sweep," he ordered calmly. "Every team member involved in that flight. Names, histories. I want statements." "Yes, sir." "And the board? Tell them we're delaying the IPO briefing until further notice. My granddaughter was profiled by a crew we partially fund. There are going to be consequences." Back at the airport, Shelby led Aria to a small holding room. It looked more like a bad dentist's office than a place for a child to wait. Aria sat quietly, staring ahead. "You can call your parents now," Shelby said. "Or whoever." Her tone wasn't cruel, but it wasn't kind either. "I already did," Aria replied quietly. "And you just made a big mistake." Shelby smirked slightly, then walked out. 10 minutes later, she wouldn't be smirking. Because 10 minutes later, Everett Westbrook himself would be stepping through the terminal doors. The story wasn't about to go viral just yet. There were no cameras, no hashtags. Just one very powerful man walking calmly toward justice. Aria watched from the holding room as the door opened and her grandfather entered. For the first time, her hands stopped shaking. Everett didn't say a word to her at first. He just knelt in front of her and looked her in the eyes. "Are you okay?" She nodded. "I didn't cry." "You didn't have to. I'm going to make sure they do." As he stood, the expression on his face was not one of anger. It was strategy, calculation, and something colder. Retribution. And as the pieces began to shift in the background, HR files pulled, internal emails reviewed, and statements recorded, Shelby and her entire team would soon realize that they hadn't just insulted a quiet black girl. They had ignited a reckoning. And the name Westbrook? By tomorrow, it would no longer be one they forgot. The sterile lighting of the security office made Aria Westbrook feel even smaller than she already did. She sat on a cold metal bench, her backpack on her lap, clutched tightly like a lifeline. The flight attendant who had dragged her from the lounge stood by the door, arms crossed, mouth tight with judgment. Another uniformed guard tapped something into a computer, pretending not to glance at her every few seconds. "This is ridiculous," Aria muttered to herself, heart pounding. "I didn't do anything wrong." Outside the small office, travelers passed by, unaware that a 12-year-old girl had just been removed from a first-class lounge like a criminal. Her cheeks burned with humiliation. She felt the sting of tears press against her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of them. The door opened. Another man in a dark suit entered. He had an air of quiet authority. He didn't look at Aria right away. Instead, he went straight to the flight attendant. "What happened?" he asked. The woman straightened. She refused to show identification and claimed she was a guest in the lounge. She wouldn't leave. When I asked who she was, she got defensive. The man turned toward Aria now. "What's your name?" "Aria." "Aria Westbrook," she said, her voice firm but low. "And who invited you to the lounge, Aria?" She reached into her backpack and pulled out the sleek black envelope with the gold crest. The invitation. It was creased now from how tightly she'd been holding it. She held it out. He took it and read. His eyebrows twitched. "Where did you get this?" "From my dad. He told me to wait in the lounge before our flight." "And your father's name?" "Jonathan Westbrook." The man blinked. The air in the room shifted. The security guard who had been typing paused, eyes lifting. The flight attendant snorted. "That's not funny." "It's not a joke," Aria said, standing now, even though her knees felt like jelly. "He owns the airline. I'm his daughter." Silence. The man in the suit studied her face carefully. Then he pulled out his phone. Aria turned away as he made the call, her eyes drifting to the window. It had started raining. She could see the tarmac from here. Somewhere out there was the jet her father had told her would take them to London. The man's voice was quiet, but urgent. "Sir, I believe we may have made a mistake." Aria didn't hear the rest. Her pulse thumped in her ears. She clutched her backpack tighter. The silence in the room had become suffocating. Then the man spoke again. "Yes, sir. Right away." He hung up, walked to the door. "You're free to go, Miss Westbrook. There's a car on the way to take you to your father." The flight attendant stepped forward. "Wait, what? Are you serious?" The man turned to her. "You just put your hands on the daughter of our controlling shareholder." Color drained from her face. Aria stood slowly. She didn't gloat, didn't smile, but something in her chest unclenched. Not because someone else would be punished, but because she had been believed. The man gestured. "Miss Westbrook, if you'll come with me." As they walked down the corridor, the flight attendant stood frozen, her expression caught somewhere between panic and disbelief. The man walking beside Aria spoke gently. "I'm sorry this happened. You should be," she said quietly. The ride through the airport was quick. They took a private corridor, then an elevator. At the top level, past a pair of sliding doors, was a private suite lined with floor-to-ceiling windows. Her father stood there, Jonathan Westbrook, tall, calm, and visibly furious. He knelt as soon as she entered. "Are you okay?" "I am now." He looked at the man who brought her. "Names. All of them. The flight attendant, the guard. I want reports filed and personnel reviews by the hour." "Yes, sir." Jonathan turned back to Arya. "I told them to expect you. Someone didn't get the message. That's not your fault." She nodded, finally allowing herself to relax. She wanted to cry, to hug him, but she just sat next to him instead, calm, composed, like he always told her to be. Jonathan's phone buzzed. He looked at it, then smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. The board's on. They're watching security footage now. The entire flight crew will be briefed before we take off, but first we'll walk through the lounge together. Why? He stood. Because sometimes walking in truth is the best way to make people remember who you are. And so they did. Jonathan Westbrook, owner of the airline, walked through the VIP lounge holding his daughter's hand. Every conversation quieted. Every eye followed them. And behind them, that flight attendant was being escorted out by 2 executives. Arya didn't look back. She didn't need to. The morning after the security incident at the airport lounge, Arya Westbrook sat silently in the back seat of the town car her family used when traveling. The cityscape of Atlanta blurred past the tinted windows, but Arya hardly noticed. Her mind replayed the events over and over. The disbelief on the faces of the guards, the humiliation of being dragged away like a criminal, and the fear that lodged itself deep in her chest. In her hand, she clutched a small leather-bound journal, a gift from her grandmother. Inside, she had begun documenting everything that had happened, every word, every look, every action. She wasn't sure yet what she was going to do with it, but writing it down made her feel like she had control over at least something. Across town, Malcolm Westbrook sat in his office on the top floor of the Dominion Ventures building, the skyline stretching wide beyond the wall of glass. His phone buzzed with updates from his legal and communications teams, but he kept his attention fixed on a grainy security image, paused on his screen. In it, his daughter, his only living child, was being escorted out of a lounge she technically owned more than 40% of. His jaw tightened. There would be no quiet settling of this, not this time. Downstairs in the communications wing, Evelyn Nash, the firm's longtime VP of public strategy, was already at work. She was preparing a 3-phase whisper campaign, not to expose anyone, yet, but to shift public perception. Evelyn understood what few did. Power didn't move with lawsuits or threats. It moved with narrative. The first step, leak footage of Arya being removed from the lounge, but stripped of sound and context, framed to suggest bias and abuse of authority. It wouldn't go viral for its cruelty. It would go viral because of what it revealed. A young black girl being treated like an intruder in a space she quietly owned. "Let them start asking questions," Evelyn said calmly to her assistant. "Let them dig their own graves." Back at home, Arya sat at the kitchen island, poking at a bowl of oatmeal. Her mother, Simone Westbrook, walked in holding her phone. "Evelyn just called," Simone said. "She says it's time for your voice to be heard, but on your terms." "My voice?" Arya asked. Simone nodded. "They want to do an anonymous op-ed, something personal about what it feels like to be treated like you don't belong, when you do." Arya blinked. She had so many feelings. She wasn't even sure where to start. But maybe that was the point. Maybe sharing her side would help her own healing too. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll try." 3 days later, a piece titled "I was dragged out of a lounge." my family helped build appeared on a high-traffic editorial platform. It didn't name names. It didn't point fingers, but it struck a nerve. The comments poured in by the thousands. Mothers, teachers, Black professionals, airline employees, travelers. The story tapped into something deeper than just one incident. It spoke to a lived reality many knew too well. And while Aria remained unnamed, some sharp-eyed users made the connection. That looks like the Dominion kid. Did you see who owns the lounge she mentioned? Wait a second. Is this about Sky North? And just like that, the Whisper campaign had its teeth. At Dominion HQ, Evelyn monitored the public sentiment closely. The story was spreading without them needing to amplify it overtly. Now came Phase 2. Influencer seeding, former flight staffers, travel bloggers, Black professionals with platforms. One after another, they shared personal stories of being questioned, denied, disrespected. Aria watched the unfolding storm from her bedroom. Each new voice added weight to her own. And still, no one had said her name until the airline responded. A terse statement appeared on Sky North's social feeds. "We take these allegations seriously. An internal review is underway. We are committed to equitable treatment for all passengers." Aria stared at the statement, then laughed. "Allegations," she muttered, as if there wasn't video, as if I imagined it. But Evelyn had warned her. The real battle hadn't started yet. "You ready for the next step?" Evelyn texted that evening. Aria stared at the phone. Was she? She looked at her journal, still open on her desk. On the last page, she had written one sentence the night it happened. "They thought I was nobody." She picked up her pen and added, "They were wrong." She picked up the phone. "Yes," she said. "Let's begin." Aria sat at the edge of her bed, the early morning light filtering through the penthouse windows. Seattle's skyline glimmered beyond the glass, but her eyes were fixed on the envelope in her hands. A simple white envelope with her name, handwritten in neat, familiar strokes. Aria Westbrook, her grandmother's handwriting. The weight of it pulsed like a heartbeat in her hands. This was what she had come for. What the entire last 48 hours had led her to. It had been tucked inside a safe, hidden behind a false panel in her late grandfather's study. Inside were two things: this envelope and a thin file folder marked Sky North in bold letters. Neither gave answers outright. Both promised revelations. She glanced toward the breakfast nook where her grandmother, Evelyn Westbrook, stood calmly stirring a spoon through a cup of chamomile tea, as if she hadn't just dismantled their entire family history the night before. "You okay, darling?" Aria nodded, though her fingers trembled. "Can I open it now?" Evelyn gave a soft smile. "It was always meant for you." Aria broke the seal carefully, lifting out a single folded letter. Her eyes scanned the lines, the voice of her father, whom she barely remembered, rising from the page. "If you're reading this, it means your grandmother has decided it's time. I hope you're ready for the truth, even if it changes everything you've believed about yourself, about me." She read in silence, the words soaking into her bones. The letter detailed everything: the merger that had gone sideways, the anonymous threats, and the decision to fake her identity, not to protect her wealth, but to protect her life. Her father, Aaron Westbrook, had uncovered a corrupt financial alliance among 4 rival airline CEOs. When he tried to expose them, one of them retaliated, causing the accident that took his life. Evelyn, with her political reach, had erased Aria's name from public records, replacing it with a new identity, hiding her in plain sight. "They were going to kill you next," the letter read. "We had no choice. Arya folded the letter slowly, her heart pounding. I thought I was just a girl with a secret last name. Evelyn walked over, placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. You are so much more. You are the rightful heir to the Westbrook Foundation and the controlling trust that holds a stake in not just Sky North, but 3 of their competitors. Your father set it up to ensure you would never be powerless again. Arya blinked. Then why now? Why let me live like a regular teen until this moment? Evelyn exhaled. Because power given too early destroys more than it protects. But what happened at the airport? That changed everything. Her mind flashed back to the scene. Security guards dragging her through the terminal. The humiliation of being accused of trespassing in first class. The entire world watching, recording. The hashtags. The headlines. You think they know who I am now? Some do. And the ones who don't? They will. But now you can meet them on your own terms. With truth, not shame. Arya sat back, letting the truth settle. So many things made sense now. The secrecy, the private tutors, the heavily guarded vacations, even Barrett, the quiet family driver who had doubled as her shadow for as long as she could remember. She turned to the Sky North folder next. Inside, balance sheets, ownership structures, flight crew evaluations. But tucked at the back was something far more telling. A list of names, executives, board members, and next to them, handwritten annotations in Evelyn's sharp cursive. Malcolm Haynes, CEO, Sky North Airlines. New Aaron, suspected of whistleblower suppression. Janet Kroll, Chief of Security. Ordered Arya's removal. Liam Chen, Majority Stakeholder. Soft target. Arya closed the folder. Her voice was steady. So what now? I own them? Evelyn nodded slowly. You own enough. But power doesn't just come from ownership. It comes from how you use it. And you, my dear, get to choose. A flicker of fear passed through her, then resolve. She stood, clutching both the letter and the folder to her chest. Then it's time they knew who I am. All of them. Her grandmother nodded once. Then we start with the boardroom. By noon, Arya found herself in a sleek black sedan, pulling into the underground garage of Sky North's corporate headquarters. Barrett sat behind the wheel, silent as always, but his eyes met hers in the rearview mirror. Watchful, proud. Allegations, she muttered, as if there wasn't video, as if I imagined it. But Evelyn had warned her. The real battle hadn't started yet. You ready for the next step? Evelyn texted that evening. Arya stared at the phone. Was she? She looked at her journal, still open on her desk. On the last page, she had written one sentence the night it happened. They thought I was nobody. She picked up her pen and added, they were wrong. She picked up the phone. Yes, she said. Let's begin. Arya sat at the edge of her bed, the early morning light filtering through the penthouse windows. Seattle's skyline glimmered beyond the glass, but her eyes were fixed on the envelope in her hands, a simple white envelope with her name, handwritten in neat, familiar strokes. Arya Westbrook, her grandmother's handwriting. The weight of it pulsed like a heartbeat in her hands. This was what she had come for, what the entire last 48 hours had led her to. It had been tucked inside a safe, hidden behind a false panel in her late grandfather's study. Inside were two things. This envelope and a thin file folder marked Sky North in bold letters. Neither gave answers outright. Both promised revelations. She glanced toward the breakfast nook where her grandmother, Evelyn Westbrook, stood calmly stirring a spoon through a cup of chamomile tea. as if she hadn't just dismantled their entire family history the night before. "You okay, darling?" Arya nodded, though her fingers trembled. "Can I open it now?" Evelyn gave a soft smile. "It was always meant for you." Arya broke the seal carefully, lifting out a single folded letter. Her eyes scanned the lines, the voice of her father, whom she barely remembered, rising from the page. "If you're reading this, it means your grandmother has decided it's time. I hope you're ready for the truth, even if it changes everything you've believed about yourself, about me." She read in silence, the words soaking into her bones. The letter detailed everything: the merger that had gone sideways, the anonymous threats, and the decision to fake her identity, not to protect her wealth, but to protect her life. Her father, Aaron Westbrook, had uncovered a corrupt financial alliance among 4 rival airline CEOs. When he tried to expose them, one of them retaliated, causing the accident that took his life. Evelyn, with her political reach, had erased Arya's name from public records, replacing it with a new identity, hiding her in plain sight. "They were going to kill you next," the letter read. "We had no choice." Arya folded the letter slowly, her heart pounding. "I thought I was just a girl with a secret last name." Evelyn walked over, placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You are so much more. You are the rightful heir to the Westbrook Foundation, and the controlling trust that holds a stake in not just Sky North, but 3 of their competitors. Your father set it up to ensure you would never be powerless again." Arya blinked. "Then why now? Why let me live like a regular teen until this moment?" Evelyn exhaled. "Because power given too early destroys more than it protects." "But what happened at the airport? That changed everything." Her mind flashed back to the scene. Security guards dragging her through the terminal. The humiliation of being accused of trespassing in first class. The entire world watching, recording. The hashtags, the headlines. You think they know who I am now? Some do. And the ones who don't? They will. But now you can meet them on your own terms. With truth, not shame. Arya sat back, letting the truth settle. So many things made sense now. The secrecy, the private tutors, the heavily guarded vacations. Even Barrett, the quiet family driver who had doubled as her shadow for as long as she could remember. She turned to the Sky North folder next. Inside, balance sheets, ownership structures, flight crew evaluations. But tucked at the back was something far more telling. A list of names, executives, board members, and next to them, handwritten annotations in Evelyn's sharp cursive. Malcolm Haynes, CEO Sky North Airlines. New Aaron, suspected of whistleblower suppression. Janet Kroll, Chief of Security, ordered Arya's removal. Liam Chen, majority stakeholder. Soft target. Arya closed the folder. Her voice was steady. "So what now? I own them?" Evelyn nodded slowly. "You own enough. But power doesn't just come from ownership. It comes from how you use it. And you, my dear, get to choose." A flicker of fear passed through her, then resolve. She stood, clutching both the letter and the folder to her chest. "Then it's time they knew who I am. All of them." Her grandmother nodded once. "Then we start with the boardroom." By noon, Arya found herself in a sleek black sedan, pulling into the underground garage of Sky North's corporate headquarters. Barrett sat behind the wheel, silent as always, but his eyes met hers in the rearview mirror. Watchful. Proud. Dressed in a tailored blazer Evelyn had picked herself, Arya no longer looked like the girl dragged from first class 2 days ago. She looked like someone who belonged. Barrett opened her door and escorted her to the private elevator, swiping a key card only Evelyn and a few others possessed. She stepped inside alone. The doors closed, and the numbers climbed. Arya's heart beat in her ears. She remembered the airport, the pain, the shame. Now she was walking into the lion's den with teeth bared. The elevator dinged, and when the doors opened, Arya Westbrook stepped out. Not as a scared girl, but as the force her father had prepared her to become. And Sky North had no idea what was coming next. The sterile light of the security office stung Arya's eyes. The space was cold, overly air-conditioned, with the faint chemical scent of floor disinfectant clinging to the air. 2 uniformed officers stood beside her, arms crossed, while a third rifled through her small carry-on bag with methodical indifference. Arya sat still, her wrists resting awkwardly on the hard plastic chair. Her heart thudded against her rib cage like a fist on a locked door, but her face remained blank. She'd learned from her mother. Never let them see you crack. You think I stole that ticket? She finally asked. Her voice calm, but edged with steel. Officer Moreno looked up. He was older, his lined face tight with weariness rather than suspicion. But the younger woman beside him, Officer Lake, flinched at the question. "Ma'am," Moreno said, his tone tired, rehearsed. "We're verifying a discrepancy. You're not listed in our system as a passenger on Flight 773 to Atlanta." "Because your system is wrong," Arya replied evenly. Lake bristled. "And yet, you were in the first-class lounge without credentials." Arya let out a breath. Not a sigh, just a slow release of the frustration curling beneath her ribs. "My name is Arya Westbrook." "Look again." But they already had. Over and over. And yet no listing had appeared. Because the booking hadn't come through a standard portal. Because her mother didn't do things the standard way. When the door opened, and the flight attendant who had started all this stepped in, Arya felt her knuckles tighten around the edge of the seat. Margot Pierce. Her name was now seared into Arya's memory. Margot didn't even look at her at first. She walked straight to the officers. "Sorry to interrupt, but I just wanted to confirm what I saw." The girl was behaving suspiciously. I did what I thought was best given the circumstances. "Suspiciously?" Arya echoed, rising to her feet. She was barely 5 feet tall, but in that moment she felt taller than the entire room. Margot turned slowly, and the smug smile faltered for a second. "Just a flicker. You mean sitting quietly in a lounge and minding my own business? That was your idea of a threat?" "I didn't say threat. I said suspicious." Arya felt her chest rise. The room shrank to just the 2 of them. "You didn't like the way I looked. That's what this was." Silence. Officer Moreno cleared his throat. "Ma'am, if you could please wait outside." Margot lingered, but eventually left. Arya could feel her gaze on her back the entire time. When the door clicked shut, Moreno turned back. He looked at Lake, then at Arya. "We need to make a call." Arya nodded. "I already did." He raised an eyebrow. She met his gaze with full force. "You can ask to see your manifest again, or you can check who owns the Sky North loyalty fund that underwrites your quarterly bonuses. Either way, I suggest you do it fast." Lake blinked. "Wait. What?" Before Arya could respond, the landline on the officer's desk rang. Moreno answered. One word from the other side changed everything. "Yes, sir. Yes, understood." He hung up. His face had gone pale. He stood, stepped back, and said something Arya would never forget. "Miss Westbrook, We deeply apologize. It seems there's been a misunderstanding. You're free to go." Lake looked baffled. "Sir, that was Deputy Director Barnes," Moreno said. "Sky North Board liaison. He said the girl is not only a passenger, she's the reason your salary got approved last month." Lake stared at Arya. "Who? Who are you?" Arya didn't answer. She walked past them, slow and sure. Not a strut, but something deeper. In her bones, she could feel it. The weight of legacy, the force of bloodline. When the office door closed behind her, she exhaled. Barrett was waiting in the hallway, phone in hand. "It's handled," he said softly. "Thank you." He studied her a moment. "You okay?" Arya gave a tight nod. "I will be." But her mind was racing. Margot hadn't just humiliated her. She had triggered something. A memory, a fire, a voice. Never let them decide who you are. Not even for a minute. Her mother's words as they walked toward the elevator that would take them back to the terminal. Barrett's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then turned the screen toward Arya. By noon, Arya found herself in a sleek black sedan, pulling into the underground garage of Sky North's corporate headquarters. Barrett sat behind the wheel, silent as always, but his eyes met hers in the rearview mirror, watchful, proud. "Your mother. Press conference starts in 15. You want to watch?" Arya stopped walking. "No," she said. "I want to be there." Barrett tilted his head. "You sure? It's across the city. I'm done being hidden, done being someone who needs to be handled. I'm showing up." She turned to him. "I want them to see exactly who they tried to erase." The ride to the Sky North downtown tower was quick, but every second stretched with anticipation. Arya watched the streets roll by. The city was still unfamiliar, but today it felt like a battleground. And she wasn't scared. In the building lobby, people paused as she walked past. A few recognized her. Most didn't, but they would. The press room was already half full. Her mother stood near the podium, speaking quietly with a communications aide. When she looked up and saw Arya at the entrance, something flickered in her eyes. Shock, then red bam a bit, then resolve. She raised a hand to stop the event prep. "Let her through." The reporters stirred as Arya approached. Sienna Westbrook moved to meet her daughter halfway. Her voice was low but urgent. "You don't have to do this. I know," Arya said. "I want to." Her mother searched her eyes. Whatever she saw there, it was enough. They turned together toward the room. Cameras adjusted. Flash bulbs began to pop. Sienna leaned to the mic. "Before we begin, there's someone you should meet." She stepped aside. Arya took the microphone. She didn't fidget, didn't pause. Her voice was clear. "My name is Arya Westbrook, and today, someone tried to erase me." Gasps. Cameras. They thought I didn't belong. Because I was young. Because I was black. Because I was quiet. She glanced at her mother, then back. "But I come from a long line of women who don't stay erased. I know who I am. And soon, so will everyone else." And that was how it began. The real beginning. Not of scandal, not of headlines, but of Arya stepping out of the shadow, into her name, into her blood, into her spine. The black town car rolled to a smooth stop at the private entrance of the Sky North Executive Terminal. Arya sat silently in the back seat, her hands gripping the hem of her coat. Her heart pounded in her ears. Beside her, Barrett checked his watch. "We have a 15-minute window," he said quietly. "Enough time for the board to review the footage, and for you to be seen." "Not heard?" Arya asked. her voice tinged with sarcasm. It was how she masked fear. Barrett gave her a half smile. Heard if you want to be. But seen first. That's more powerful. The car door opened, and Arya stepped out into the cold evening air. The Sky North headquarters loomed ahead like a fortress of glass and steel. Just behind its reflective facade sat the boardroom, where decisions affecting thousands of lives were made. She'd grown up in the shadow of this building, but never in its light. Inside the lobby, security officers were already buzzing. A woman in a tailored navy blazer stepped forward. "You're not authorized," she started. Then Mersdawad Barrett stepped in front of Arya and handed over a phone. On the screen was a paused video clip. "You might want to watch that before you embarrass yourself," Barrett said smoothly. The woman watched. Her face paled. Without a word, she stepped aside. The security gate clicked open. Arya walked through. Upstairs, Malcolm Hayes stood at the end of the long boardroom table. Around him sat 12 men and women, each a shareholder or strategic partner. On the screen behind him, paused footage from the Sky North terminal. "We've reviewed the preliminary edit," Lisa Chen said. "The full footage is being delivered to CNN in the Wall Street Journal tonight, unless, of course, the board has a better idea." There were murmurs. One board member, a silver-haired man with a clipped British accent, leaned forward. "You're saying this girl is your daughter and she was publicly humiliated?" "No," Malcolm replied. "I'm saying she is your future CEO." A sharp intake of breath. Then, the door opened. All heads turned. Arya stepped into the boardroom like she belonged there, because in truth, she did. "Good evening," she said, her voice more steady than she felt. She looked directly at the woman who'd first called security on her, Marla Brooks. The woman shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "Do you know what it feels like?" Arya began. "To have your identity denied simply because you don't match someone's assumption of power, of wealth, of ownership?" No one answered. Arya walked slowly toward the screen, where the paused footage showed Marla standing with 2 airport guards, pointing at Arya. "That's the moment," Arya continued, "when I stopped being seen as a person and started being treated like a threat, a black girl with a boarding pass in first class." She turned back to the room. "My name is Arya Westbrook. I am 12 years old, and I am the legal beneficiary of the controlling fund behind 4 of the 5 airlines represented in this room, including this one." A stunned silence. Malcolm Hayes smiled faintly. "She has the legal right to request a vote of no confidence," Lisa added. "And if we go public, the footage will speak louder than any PR spin." The silver-haired Brit cleared his throat. "Ms. Westbrook, what outcome are you looking for? Revenge?" "No," Arya replied. "Reform and respect." She pulled a folder from her coat. "This is a proposed framework for mandatory anti-bias training across all 5 airlines. Quarterly assessments, anonymous passenger surveys. Any crew member flagged more than once is suspended pending investigation." Another board member, a woman in her 60s, spoke up. "And if we refuse?" Barrett stepped forward, placing a separate document on the table. "Then the Coates Foundation will withdraw its $2.7 billion credit facility by morning, and Sky North will lose the pending merger with Transair." Marla Brooks looked up, pale. "I didn't know who she was." "That's the point," Arya said softly. "You shouldn't need to know who someone is to treat them with dignity." The board vote took 5 minutes. The motion to adopt Arya's framework passed unanimously. Outside, Arya stood on the steps, finally breathing. For the first time that day, her shoulders loosened. Barrett handed her a warm drink. "You good, Miss Westbrook?" Arya looked at the lights of the city below. Getting there, she said. But tell me, do you think she meant it? Marla? Barrett took a moment. I think she'll remember you every time she sees another young black girl walk into first class. That's a start. Arya sipped her drink, the taste of justice quiet, but powerful. Down the street, news alerts began to ping. Breaking! CEO's daughter speaks out after discrimination incident. Sky North to implement new anti-bias policy after viral video. Barrett's phone buzzed. He looked at it, then held it out. Your mom. Arya took the phone. On the screen was a text. Proud of you. Come home soon. She smiled. Let's go, Barrett. I've got a school project due Monday. They both laughed. She was 12. She was powerful. She was Arya Westbrook, and the world was finally starting to see her for who she truly was. The hallway outside the Meridian Executive Suite was silent, except for the soft click of Arya's heels on the marble floor. Barrett walked a respectful distance behind her, his usual composed expression showing just the slightest trace of concern. They'd just left Malcolm's private office, where he had confirmed the full extent of the Westbrook family's financial entanglement with Meridian, and more importantly, with its competitors. Arya's world had shifted again, but this time, the ground felt strangely solid beneath her feet. In her hands, she carried a black leather folder, one that had sat in the safe behind Malcolm's desk for over a decade. Inside were documents her mother had instructed the firm's legal team to preserve under Contingency Code 418, a sealed equity agreement, private memos between former board members, and most shocking of all, a handwritten letter from Evelyn Westbrook herself. It was addressed to Arya. She hadn't opened it yet. Part of her was terrified it would confirm her worst fears, that her mother had known everything and said nothing, that Arya had been groomed from childhood not just for protection, but for strategy, a tool in a corporate chess game. But part of her needed to know. She stepped into the quiet, private lounge near the 29th floor, where Barrett had suggested they stop before heading to the investor summit that evening. The room was elegant, bathed in golden light from floor to ceiling windows that looked out over the Seattle skyline. Arya moved to the far corner, sat down, and finally opened the envelope. The handwriting was delicate but unmistakable, her mother's cursive, clean and purposeful. My dearest Arya, if you are reading this, it means you've uncovered the truth, or at least a portion of it. I have always believed you would. You have your father's resolve, but your own clarity of spirit. When I chose to step away, it wasn't out of fear. It was strategy. I didn't want you to inherit my battles, only the keys to winning your own. This airline, it doesn't belong to the board, or the shareholders, or even to the public. It belongs to those who have suffered within it, and still chose to rise. That's why I've kept you hidden in plain sight. The day would come when they'd test your right to belong, and when it did, I needed you to be underestimated. So when you proved them wrong, the correction would echo. Love fiercely. Lead wisely. Mom. Arya blinked back tears, not from sadness, but from relief. The kind of relief that comes from finally being seen, even if only in writing. Evelyn hadn't abandoned her. She had prepared her. Barrett stepped forward, quietly placing a glass of water on the table beside her. Everything all right? He asked. She knew, Arya said, voice low. She planned this, all of it. He didn't ask for clarification. He simply sat across from her and gave her the silence she needed to process. Later that evening, the ballroom at the Grand Meridian Hotel shimmered with the soft glow of crystal chandeliers and the buzz of aviation elite. The summit was supposed to be a celebration. Meridian's IPO announcement had been projected for Q3, and the board had spent months quietly courting foreign investors. But the air tonight felt different, tense, because Evelyn Westbrook's daughter had arrived, escorted by Malcolm Hayes. When Arya entered, the murmur began. Who is she? Why is Hayes walking beside her? Wasn't she that girl from the first-class incident? Malcolm stood tall, but said nothing. He didn't need to. His presence beside Arya was statement enough. She belonged here. As they reached the front of the ballroom, Lisa Chen stepped up to the mic to open the summit. Her voice was calm, precise. Like always. Before we begin, I'd like to recognize a guest who embodies the very future this industry must embrace. Not just because of her last name, but because of what she represents. A pause. Rhea Westbrook. Gasps echoed. Board members whispered furiously to one another. A few looked outright panicked. Arya walked to the podium, heart steady now. This wasn't about anger anymore. It was about accountability. 3 days ago, she began, I was treated like an intruder on your aircraft. I was escorted off a first-class seat I paid for, simply because someone didn't believe I belonged there. They didn't know who I was, or maybe they didn't care. The ballroom was dead silent. What they didn't know was that I'm not just a passenger. I'm not just a daughter. I'm a majority rights holder in the fund that controls the $2 billion credit line, underwriting 5 major airlines, including yours. And I've spent the last 72 hours freezing every single cent. Shock rippled across the crowd. A few phones lit up, executives frantically texting, already seeing their quarterly projections implode. Arya continued, but this isn't just about revenge. It's about reform. Starting tonight, Meridian will be required to adopt the Westbrook standards, a system of evaluation, training, and accountability for every member of your frontline teams. You want the money to keep flowing? Then you treat every passenger like they belong, especially the ones you think don't. She stepped back from the mic. It was done. Back in the car afterward, as the skyline blurred past the windows, Barrett turned to her with quiet pride. Your mother would have been proud. She already told me, Arya replied, placing the folded letter back into her bag. Have you ever had someone try to silence you in a moment that mattered most, only to realize it made your voice louder in the end? Let us know if this moment with Arya reminded you of a time you stood your ground when the odds were against you. The conference room was cold, too cold. Arya Westbrook could feel the chill through her cardigan as she stood before the glass wall, looking out over the terminal. Planes landed and took off with indifferent regularity, and she imagined each aircraft carrying someone away from this nightmare. Maybe if she had wings, she'd fly too. Behind her, the muffled sounds of tense voices filtered through the closed door of the adjacent executive suite. Her father, Lionel Westbrook, was in there now with the board of Sky North Airlines, and he was not smiling. Her hands gripped the silver railing tightly. The events of the morning had been a blur, but the sting of humiliation still flared hot in her chest. That flight attendant, Miss Larkin, hadn't just called security. She'd dragged Arya into public scrutiny, made her feel small, unworthy, and most painfully, powerless. All because she didn't believe that a black girl in beat-up Converse and a faded hoodie could belong in first class, let alone be the heir to the company. And now, the truth was blowing through corporate like a summer wildfire. Miss Westbrook? She turned. It was Lisa Marin, Sky North's general counsel. The woman looked composed, but her eyes carried a weight Arya didn't recognize at first. Pity mixed with embarrassment. Your father asked if you'd like to join the discussion. Arya raised an eyebrow. What is there to discuss? I was publicly humiliated by your staff. Pretty sure that's self-explanatory. Lisa flinched but nodded. He's making a statement, one the entire company will feel. That got Aria's attention. As she followed Lisa down the hallway, she caught glances. Long, lingering stares from executives and managers who had passed her in hallways for years, never knowing who she was. She used to move like a ghost in this building. Lionel insisted it was for her protection. Now her presence crackled with tension. Everyone knew. Everyone had seen the footage. And now, no one could unsee it. The conference room doors opened, and the energy in the room shifted. Her father sat at the head of the table, dark eyes steady, jaws set like granite. Beside him was Chairman Haverly, pale and rigid. On the large screen at the end of the room, the company's code of ethics and public conduct policy glowed against a blue background. "Aria," Lionel said, gesturing to the seat beside him. "Have a seat. You should hear this." She sat, her heart thumping against her ribs. "Let the record show," Lionel began, his voice even, but carrying unmistakable edge, that this board has been notified of an incident involving racial bias, abuse of power, and the unlawful detainment of a minor passenger with full legal travel clearance. That passenger was my daughter, Aria Westbrook. Murmurs erupted, but he raised a hand. While the personnel involved have been suspended pending full review, we are enacting more than a disciplinary measure. We are initiating a systemic correction. Chairman Haverly coughed. "Lionel, perhaps we should—" "No," Lionel said sharply. "We're doing this now, because this isn't just about Aria. This is about a culture of bias, of assumption, that has cost us not just dignity, but dollars, and I'm no longer willing to tolerate that." He stood, walking slowly toward the window. Aria watched him, this man she both admired and resented, the same man who had spent a decade hiding her from the public eye, from scrutiny, and, she now realized, possibly from his own shame. "I have already frozen our upcoming $220 million expansion deal until a full review of internal conduct policies is complete. All pending vendor contracts will include mandatory bias training clauses. And yes, I have instructed compliance to begin restructuring our executive onboarding protocols." He turned back to them. "Because if a child, my child, can be treated like a threat for simply existing in first class, then every passenger of color who boards our flights is vulnerable. That ends now." A silence fell over the room that even the hum of the projector couldn't fill. Then, Aria stood. "I have something to say too." Her voice was quiet but firm. She could feel every eye in the room on her. "I'm not just Lionel Westbrook's daughter. I'm not just a headline. I'm someone who was raised by this company. I used to play with paper airplanes in this building while you all talked about profit margins. I know the faces in this room better than you know mine." Her hands trembled slightly, but she didn't stop. "I never wanted to be a symbol, but today, I am one, and I'm okay with that. If it means no other girl like me has to be treated like a criminal for existing where she belongs." A beat passed, and then, to her surprise, a soft clap came from the end of the table. Lisa Marine, then another, and another, until the room was filled with the sound of people clapping, not out of politeness, but something deeper. Maybe recognition, maybe shame, maybe change. After the meeting, Aria returned to the observation lounge, emotionally drained. Her father joined her minutes later. "I didn't know if you'd speak up," he said, hands in his pockets. "I wanted to protect you." "By keeping me invisible?" she replied. He didn't answer. "I don't want to be invisible anymore," Aria said, her voice lower now. Not here. Not anywhere. He nodded slowly. I was wrong, Lionel admitted. I thought hiding you would keep you safe. But maybe it just kept you from finding your power. Arya looked out the window again. A child was boarding a plane with her mother, her tiny hand gripping a boarding pass. She looked about 8. Her face was filled with wonder. I want a role in the Passenger Equity Initiative, Arya said suddenly. Not as your daughter, as someone who knows what it feels like to be seen as less than human. Lionel smiled faintly. Then you'll have it, on your own merit. She nodded once. It was a start. Outside, the sky over the tarmac was beginning to clear. Not perfect, not healed, but brighter than it had been. The boardroom was too quiet. Every ticking second from the antique brass clock above the panoramic window echoed like thunder in Arya's ears. She stood at one end of the long table, her small hands clenched at her sides. Across from her sat a dozen people, executives in suits, legal advisors, even the head of Sky North's public relations, all staring with varying degrees of disbelief, discomfort, and thinly veiled guilt. Just 36 hours ago, most of them had barely acknowledged Arya Westbrook. She was just another child, trailing behind a powerful name, an invisible heiress under the shadow of legacy. But now, in the wake of the terminal incident, her name was on every internal memo, not because of who her father was, but because of what she had done. The silence shattered when Arya spoke. I'm here to ask one question, she said, her voice steady. Despite the storm raging inside, who authorized the call to remove me from first class? No one answered. She scanned their faces. Some looked down. Some blinked away. Some crossed their arms like shields. You all saw the footage, she continued. You all read the reports. I was humiliated in public, in your uniform, on your plane, while holding a valid boarding pass that had my name on it. And all because, she paused, someone thought a black girl didn't belong up front. Still, no response. It was Ms. Karen Lawton, Sky North's VP of Customer Experience, who finally cleared her throat. Ms. Westbrook, I want to be extremely careful how I respond to this. You should be, Arya replied coldly. Ms. Lawton shifted in her seat. The actions taken by the crew, while clearly misguided, were not part of any official directive from senior management. They were individual misjudgments. Arya's eyes narrowed. So, that's what we're calling systemic bias now? Misjudgment? Arya came another voice. It was Councilman Tay Randall, her godfather, and one of Sky North's board observers. He stood slowly, placing a calming hand on the table. We're not here to deflect. We're here to listen, and we're prepared to act. The room held its breath. Arya took out a folder from her tote bag, the same one she had carried on that cursed flight. She placed it flat on the table, opened it, and pushed it forward. Then act on this, she said. Inside were 3 items: a formal complaint letter, a digital dossier of discriminatory incidents involving Sky North employees over the past 4 years, and a draft initiative proposal titled Operation Cabin Clear, an internal program Arya had spent weeks researching, designing, and refining with a team of youth equity consultants. It wasn't just an act of protest. It was a blueprint for reform. I'm not just filing a grievance, she said. I'm offering a solution. Your brand doesn't need another press statement. It needs a transformation. Ms. Lawton looked through the documents, her brow furrowing deeper with every page. This isn't a school project, said one of the older board members at the far end of the table, his voice low and skeptical. You're 16, I'm 12, Arya corrected, her tone sharper than ever. And I still managed to do what none of your departments have done in years. Talk to the actual youth flying your airline. A sharp inhale from someone on the left, a suppressed chuckle from someone on the right. But no one dared to challenge her again. Councilman Randall leaned forward. I've reviewed the initiative, he said. If we're serious about modernizing our passenger experience, this plan needs to be considered. Immediately, it was CEO Malcolm Hayes who broke the tension. We're not going to pretend this didn't happen, he said from the head of the table. I failed to protect my daughter, and this company failed to protect its values. He stood, buttoned his jacket, and turned to Arya. This board will not adjourn until we vote on implementing your program. Full transparency, real accountability, no more hiding behind PR. Man who had whispered to her on nights when grief for her mother threatened to swallow her whole. Now, he was standing as both her father and the CEO of a billion-dollar enterprise, finally using both titles to do something right. I'm proud of you, he said. Arya didn't respond. She wasn't ready for sentiment. Not yet. The boardroom shifted into motion. Papers shuffled. Screens lit up. Advisors whispered. But Arya stepped away from the table and walked toward the window, her heart pounding. Outside, Seattle's skyline stretched beyond the glass. The same skyline that had once felt so far above her, unreachable. But today, the glass didn't feel like a barrier. It felt like a window, one she had broken through. Behind her, she heard votes being cast, one by one, all in favor. Her father approached quietly and stood beside her. You just made history in there, he said. No, Arya said. I just made them listen. She turned to him, finally allowing the smallest crack in her armor. But I'm still not done. Malcolm nodded. I know. She looked back at this room behind them, at the executives, the compliance officers, the policies being drafted in real time. I want to sit on the Diversity Oversight Committee, she said. You're 12, and you said that's when you made your first investment pitch, she reminded him. I think I'm allowed to match your ambition. A slow grin broke across his face. I'll make the call. No, Arya said. I will. They stood in silence for a moment, then turned together toward the long glass table, where change had finally begun. Not out of fear, not out of damage control, but because a girl they thought too young, too angry, too out of place had made it impossible to look away. 2 weeks later, Arya Westbrook stood once again at Terminal D, the same terminal where her story had broken wide open. But this time, no security guards approached her. No suspicious glances tracked her every move. This time, everyone knew exactly who she was, and more importantly, why she mattered. She adjusted the navy blazer over her crisp white shirt. The pin on her lapel was new, a sleek gold-winged insignia of the Sky North Youth Advisory Council, an initiative her boardroom proposal had transformed into policy in just 13 days. It had started with her story, but Arya was determined it wouldn't end there. A group of teen volunteers stood behind her in matching Sky North polos, excited and nervous. They represented the first cohort of youth inclusion ambassadors, and today was their formal induction. Their mission? To observe, report, and recommend improvements based on first-hand passenger experiences, especially from marginalized communities. It was the first program of its kind in the airline industry, and Arya's fingerprints were all over it. Across the concourse, a camera crew from Telltale's Weekly set up near a makeshift podium. The press had been buzzing since the story went viral, especially after the board's public release of the apology, the training overhaul, and the adoption of Arya's Operation Cabin Clear framework. Malcolm Hayes approached quietly from the side, wearing a charcoal gray suit and a soft smile. "You ready?" he asked. Aria didn't answer right away. She looked out at the terminal, watching passengers move through with a little more dignity, a little more care. Several staff members had even been replaced with more community-trained attendants, including 2 from the local NBO ACP hiring program. "Almost," she said. "Is Ms. Jennings here?" "Right on time," Malcolm replied. Marjorie Jennings, formerly Winters, walked toward them, still in uniform, but with noticeably softer edges. She looked unsure of her place until Aria offered a genuine smile. "Ms. Jennings," Aria said, extending her hand. "I'm glad you came." Marjorie shook it, visibly moved. "I still can't believe how much you've done in 2 weeks." "Change moves fast when you stop waiting for permission," Aria said with a shrug. "Besides, you gave me the push I didn't know I needed." Marjorie's voice lowered. "I'm truly sorry for how I handled that day. I've learned more about myself in these past 2 weeks than I did in 20 years of flying." Aria nodded, then turned to the gathered volunteers. "Let's give people something worth watching." She stepped up to the podium as the murmuring crowd quieted. The lights from the cameras flared, and phones rose into the air. "2 weeks ago," Aria began, "I was escorted out of this terminal by security, accused of being a fraud, a threat, and most of all, a girl who didn't belong in first class." She paused, letting the memory settle in the room. That moment could have broken me. Instead, it built this. She gestured behind her to the team of diverse teens, each one representing a different background, gender identity, ability, or income level. This isn't just about me. It's about the kids who get mistaken for trouble instead of talent, the girls who are told to know their place, the boys who learn to shrink themselves to avoid attention. This is about redefining what belongs up front. She saw eyes watering in the crowd. Parents, teens, even staffers. I want every child who steps on a plane to know that they don't need a suit or a surname to be treated with basic respect. This program isn't charity. It's accountability. We're not passengers. We're participants in change. Thunderous applause broke out. Cameras flashed. Even Marjorie clapped, tears silently sliding down her face. After the speech, as reporters called out questions and volunteers hugged each other with excitement, Aria stepped aside, breathing in the moment. Malcolm joined her again. "You know," he said quietly, "there are moments I wish your mom could see." Aria smiled faintly. "I think she does." Malcolm placed a hand on her shoulder. "You've changed more than just a company, Aria. You've changed what this family stands for." She looked up at him, then promised me you'll keep it going, even after the headlines stop. He nodded. "I will. And when you're ready, the board seat is still yours." Aria grinned. "One step at a time, Dad. I've got a flight to catch." Literally. As she turned to board, her fellow volunteers followed behind, not as passengers, but as witnesses, leaders, and future decision-makers. Have you ever been mistaken for someone you're not, just because of how you look? Share your story in the comments below. Aria's journey proves one voice can lead a whole movement. What would you stand up for if you had the mic?